The grace and peace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with you all. Welcome to this virtual celebration of worship at First Presbyterian Church of Murray, Kentucky on this second Sunday of February, in which we are very pleased to be able to continue the critical conversation about racism in America with our panel discussion partners, Sherman Neal II, Cameron Perry, Asia Blanton, Morgan Randall, Shirley Latto. I will be serving as the moderator for this event. The session and MODA are both very excited to co-sponsor this event as one of our Matthew 25 initiatives, helping to address and dismantle systemic racism in our community. We see this as just the beginning of a long-term commitment to active racial justice in our town and beyond. Before we take up the discussion where we left off from last week, I would like to center us for worship with our pastoral prayer for today, followed by a music special. Let us begin the needs of the church, the world, and all in need to God's loving care, saying, Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. Will you pray with me? Empower the church throughout the world in its life and witness. Break down the barriers that divide, that united in your truth and love, the church may confess your name, share one baptism, sit together at one table, and serve you in one common ministry. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. Guide the rulers of the nations. Move them to set aside their fear, greed, and vain ambition, and bow to your sovereign rule. Inspire them to strive for peace and justice, that all your children may dwell secure, free of war and injustice. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. We pray for those locked in circumstances beyond their control, restrained by oppressors, and seeing no end to their captivity. May they discover hope buried in deepest suffering through Jesus Christ, who shared the weakness and despair of human life, yet gave even death a new outcome and brought resurrection from a closed tomb. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. Look with compassion on all who suffer. Support with your love those with incurable and stigmatized diseases, those in prison, those denied dignity, those who live without hope, those who are homeless or abandoned. As you have moved toward us in love, so lead us to be present with them in their suffering. In the name of Jesus Christ, Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. Sustain those among us who need your healing touch. Make the sick whole, especially Sue, Amy, baby Kyrov, baby Jane, Barbara, June, Noah. Give hope to the dying. Comfort those who mourn, especially the Pittman, Alba, Mitchell, Wolf, DePaul, Adams, and Wall families. Uphold all who suffer in body or mind, not only those we know and love, but also those known only to you, that they may know the peace and joy of your supporting care. All these concerns we lift up to you for your tender care and blessing, in the name of the Christ who taught us to pray, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
So I have not been to the monument here, and part of that originally started because I was working. And, then it sort of developed into, was that where I needed to be? And what were my reactions going to be in that space? So that's mostly why I haven't been, to our monument here. I do a lot of behind the scenes, or I like to address people on a more personal level, and I don't feel like I have always been as effective just standing. And I definitely don't know that I have the personality to have the type of conversation that I think is needed with the opposing side. I think I'm either going to get too angry at them, and that's not going to be a beneficial thing, and that's going to let them turn it around, or I'm not going to say enough. Something that I did do over the summer when all of this kind of started was I went to the protest in Marshall County, and that one was powerful. When I first came to Murray, I met some people that pretty much grew up in Marshall County, and one of the first things that they told me with the Tater Day parade and that whole festival was just avoid it. Don't come through town during that, because you're going to see, a group of people coming out that are going to have 100 Confederate flags on the back of their trucks. And that just wasn't for me. The other thing that they told me was, you're not going to see black people in this town. And I said, well, why? I come from Louisville. I'm not familiar with the small town life out around here. It just didn't make sense to me. They said, because they're going to be run off. That was the culture. They said that it was known that if you were driving through Marshall County as a black person and your vehicle broke down, you get out and you walk. You don't sit there and wait for help. You get out and you walk. And that just floored me, that is so instilled and ingrained in this area, and it's acceptable to those people. So it was really important to me that I was able, and I was off work and able to go to the protests that they had in Marshall County. And it showed me a lot more of my white privilege in that moment. Walking up, I was a little bit late, and it kind of had already started, so I was coming up and by myself, walking through the streets. I was nervous. And that to me speaks on such a high level that if I am nervous just because I know what this town is known for, I can't imagine being Black and being in this space. We have to do better. We have to, change the laws but change people's hearts and minds while we're doing this. That protest was very powerful for me to be a part of, and to see so many Black people, white people, all together being supportive. But like everyone has said that has been down at the monument here at Murray, if you watch the outer circle, there were people on each corner of that town square that you could tell were there for the wrong reason. Some of them had very large weapons that I don't know what they are, but as a show of force to probably try to scare people away.
This is in Marshall County you're talking about?
Marshall County.
Yes, Marshall County was one of the worst racial cleansings of in the whole country. One of the top 12, chapter 5, and buried in bitter waters. Documented in 1906.
I've heard the stories of
horrible
of my friend growing up there, and that the KKK's meeting right down the road, and that was in the late 90s when they were living there and they were being told that. So, my point, I guess, with all of this is each one of us, as we've mentioned, needs to find our own strength in what we need to be doing to help change everything from the ground up. And that's the only way that we're going to be able to.
But does it feel like, Sherman, that you're fighting this battle alone? I mean, do you feel like you have a solid, you feel like there's solidarity with the white folks that are advocates for racial justice, or not? I mean, I like you write letters, I preach about it. I need to get off my rear end or get out of the pulpit and do more. And so I hear that and resonate with that 100%. I know there's more people out there that want to be there to do more and to have our voices heard.
So the short answer to that is absolutely not. It's definitely not alone. And just because that story about Marshall County, because I remember that protest because that's another one that I wasn't at. And the reason I wasn't there was because the people who are organizing it, who I've never met, it's pretty cool, were calling it Love on the Square, and they did a similar one here. And I'm kind of like Cam, where, there is no love in this. When I've had a teammate, a friend of mine, shot and killed by the Los Angeles Police Department, unarmed. And that was in 2012, same year that Trayvon Martin was killed. While I'm in law school, that was a formative experience for me. And I've seen, his killer signing Skittles bags. And then, you fast forward to now, and there's literally a man doing what I do all the time, being shot down in the street by 3 people who worked with the police department in Brunswick, Georgia. And so, for me, that doesn't compute. For the same reason that you couldn't attend the ones here, I could not bring myself to have a hot dog in the shadow of Robert E. Lee and think that that's going to help. And so the awesome part about that is that's me. And the same reason I don't have to go to Cam and be like, why aren't you doing this? Or, why aren't y'all doing X, Y, Z? Or, if you risk COVID to go to Walmart, but you can't risk COVID to come stand, that's why I don't do that, because, my way is a way, it's not the way. And frankly, between football, then being in the military for, 10 years, and then going back to football, I've been around alpha male, hyper-aggressive, demanding environments where you need immediate results, and it's not as focused on hearts and minds. And so a lot of the actions that I'm deficient in, I've seen other people step up and do. Frankly, like, I'm not involved in the churches out here as much as, should be. And one of the cool things in June was one of the basketball players, Witte, he's at the park with hundreds of people giving a message that touches them in a way that mine can't. And so it takes more strength for me to just shut up and let things happen than anything else. And so that's it's awesome to see, and it's there. Is it where I think it needs to be? No, but I mean, I'm also not from Murray. I understand, like, culturally and ethos-wise and change, that, it's probably going to take different tactics than I would employ. But I do think that there's an obligation to understand and respect how bad the problem is. And that's where, I'm concerned. And that's where I have questions about the pace and the time and the when. Are you going to hold somebody accountable? And the what are you going to be let said before you change out of your comfort zone somewhat? So I see all those things. And then really, that's looking at the right now. And then I wanted to quit several times. And I can recall, like, man, I don't know what to think about. Then John Lewis passes. And, I read about him and his age, and like his original message at the March on Washington was not what he wanted to say. It was a lot more sounding like more militant John Lewis. And even with Martin Luther King speaking, now, because of what's happened now, being able to read his other works, I can see him working through the same processes. And then, even this past week with Hank Aaron, and seeing what he's had to do consistently in understanding that, because this problem is pervasive, even if it comes down, we know something else is coming back. Hank Aaron, before he died, he was addressing the Senate race and the civil rights struggle. After completing, integrating baseball, being a major person to integrate baseball in dealing with racist threats to his death, John Lewis got the Voters' Rights Act passed, had it rescinded, and died having to fight again. So I also understand that, it's more than a fleeting moment of time for all of us. And so there's just going to be different ways in different ages. Because I know at 22, 23, I would not be writing or doing what I'm doing now. I'll be more along the CAM side of things. And so, and just the ability to go there and withstand, somebody walks up and they have an AR-15 or an AK-47, and it's an intimidation tactic. That would have made me feel a different way, growing up in a nice, safe suburb of Illinois, to, okay, I've seen plenty of guys doing that actually do bad things. What are you doing? You don't even have a magazine in there. What are you going to do? And so, like, I can do that and I can process it, but I can see how, that doesn't work for everybody. So that's why I feel like my role, it's I can do that. And I don't feel that other people are obligated to get to that point yet. Maybe I need to get to the point where I can go lay in the street in the middle of the square in Benton. I don't know if that's going to happen, but so I'm trying to work myself towards that as well.
I think we just have to push ourselves to do more and be better, I guess, is the whole point, right? We could do this several more times and, still not hit the tip of the iceberg, which is something we really need to do. It needs to be an ongoing conversation in the community. And I think that is one of the things that Shirley was asking, and one of her questions, I think, is how do we go about changing hearts and minds in the community? How do we go about? I don't know. I think we can't do it right now. It's going to have to be post-COVID once vaccinations are pretty well at a higher level. But I had this vision for a while that maybe we could have these community dialogues at a neutral space somewhere like the transit center, or Murray State would be a great place, but I think people like folks that support not moving Robert might be intimidated to come on campus because that's a academic institution. Smart people are there, and a lot of folks don't want to go to places of higher learning to have conversations like that. They're intimidated by that kind of environment. So more of a neutral place, like maybe the transit center office. Have a meal, a catered meal, and roundtable discussion. Have a keynote speaker where you just have somebody constantly coming in, whether it's a once a month thing where you have a keynote speaker talking about some aspect of race. And then after they give their 20-minute talk or 30 minutes, then they throw out a couple of questions for us to talk, at the tables. And so you're visiting with people of different backgrounds, and you're just getting to know people, and that's where you're breaking down these barriers. And I think that has the potential to really, where people's guards are down and you get to know one another and your backgrounds, and really, instead of this talking past each other, maybe really get to see each other as human beings, perhaps, and really get to the meat of how we can break down these barriers and deconstruct white supremacy and get past these systemic racism. But it takes much more than that. That's how you change hearts and minds on at the individual level. Of course, how you break down institutional racism is a whole nother deal.
I don't think we should focus on making them feel comfortable, because I know for myself, I can only speak for myself, they have made me feel uncomfortable, like I don't have a valid point. So, I definitely understand we'd be in a neutral space for all of us, and we'd be able to fellowship and stuff like that. But at the same time, that doesn't mean they're going to change. They might just see it as a free meal. They definitely just need to hear it, because if we keep sugarcoating everything, which I have not, most of us have not, but if they keep hearing it where people are tiptoeing around them so they don't feel uncomfortable, that's not going to do anything at all. So it's kind of like the love gathering. It's kind of the same thing, we're going to have fun, we're going to have hot dogs, and we're going to just relax and stuff. It doesn't accomplish anything. It kills a few hours, of course. People might get to know each other, but at the root of it, we're trying to get people to understand that they have bad tendencies, or they might be ignorant in some areas, but that just means they don't know something. And I think they just need to be told it instead of we're gonna float around the issue. I think we should just hit it head on, and then if that makes them push away, at least they heard it. That's
Oh
it.
yeah, you're probably gonna get more likely the moderate progressives at these that don't totally understand the depth of the issue, and maybe those are the ones that you're going to educate. But I agree, you can't tiptoe around white people. You got it. The feelings. That time period is over. That is done. It's white fragility. That's a day in the past. That can be no more. I agree 100%, Asia. So that was not entirely well thought out, what I said. You're right.
I agree. I definitely agree. Like, we could have fellowship, but I think there
But the
also
hateful
needs to
people,
be.
the hateful Confederate people that are saying nasty stuff to you, like go back to where you came from.
Yeah.
Those are not the ones.
They still probably would not show up, actually.
No, they wouldn't. No.
So they just need to hear it, and if they don't like it, that's okay, I guess. We're not here for them, you know? That's just the truth. And also, regardless of if they heard it or not, they're not gonna, most of them are not gonna listen, because even when they hear mine, they just go back with what they've already said before, and they just disregard what I've said, so.
But I have seen you on video talk to some of these Confederate folks in such a fashion that you disarm them and their argument, and you get to their humanity, and they are able to actually hear what you have to say to them and really listen to what you have to say. I've seen that on video before, and so that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, having them actually be able to hear what we're trying to say, not tiptoe around their feelings.
Part of that is, I think you talked about, having to teach them, and so that assumes that they don't know something. And one of the things that helped me understand that, one of the things that helped me understand it was early on, another coach on the team here, who's from Alabama, he went home to Birmingham area, and he came back with a textbook that his mom had from like the 60s or 70s, and he showed me a passage of the book, and he's a white guy who's actually, I've learned a lot about how to structure diversity and inclusion talks from him. And part of that is this is what they are learning. And so I spend more time learning about the United Daughters of the Confederacy and what they believe than I do about what I believe. Now, that's just because I'm weird, but it's harder to force people to unlearn something than it is to educate them on something for the first time. And so I think something that we have to respect, again, and you can only do it by directly addressing, is how successful and pervasive white supremacist groups have been in educating generations of people. You're asking people to not only disown their own knowledge, but generations of their reconcile themselves. One of the things that one of the days on the square, somebody had printed off not somebody, two realtors in this town had made a 5-page pamphlet about how I'm a terrorist because my mom's from Liberia, so they use the Africa thing and all that other type of stuff. And to me, that I knew that they were using Africa as an attack. To be able to talk to them, to be like, yes, Liberia has had 2 civil wars, in the previous century. The century before that, Liberia was established, I think, in like 1834 with James Monroe. They actually sent slaves back over there, and the reason that they had those civil wars 100 years later is because they established a plantation system and treated people differently based on their skin tone and the economic system that they learned from your ancestors. And so we've collectively learned from that, reconciled, and Liberia now has a female president, is progressive. Where are you at, in your reconciliation process? Thank you for bringing that to my attention, blah, blah, blah. That pains me, and I may want to physically accost the person, but I can get past that. But so I think the way to disarm is to do that. Now, there's a floor that you can't go beyond, and that floor was hit January 6th. Obviously, we lost the capital. We lost the capital to these groups. We can't. A police officer was beaten to death with a fire extinguisher. I just read before this, another one was stabbed with a fence pole. We have to understand that the point for a discussion is done at this point in time, and it's sorry if I'm about too much. I realized I got the opportunity to speak to a group in Collierville, Tennessee, which is right outside Memphis, to their board of mayor and aldermen, which is the equivalent of our system. And I got to thinking, like, what's worse, to speak and not be heard, or to not be heard at all? And so you're right, like, speaking is great, but if we're not being heard, then we have to find alternative means, and don't know what that is yet. And I know what that is, and it's adversarial, it's legal, and it's holding people accountable. And what makes Murray different than the other cities that have been able to get rid of these statues, these politicians, these systems, is proximity to knowing better and more minorities. We're 40 miles from a highway. The Jackson Purchase area is generally isolated from major cities if you go from Louisville to St. Louis to Nashville. And so it's tougher here to address that and build allies. And so it's that's the learning process I've been through from a rural area standpoint of how do you do that? Because it's got to be different than the extremely helpful tools like White Fragility and the other books that we all have. We're almost in the process of having to create tools and solutions for these type of places. It's like the Middle East, almost like, you want Afghanistan to have democratically elected, systems, but, they're living in mud huts. Like, you got to you have to stop with some of these practices and work them up, and you're trying to do both simultaneously when you're fighting for justice, and then you're also trying to be like, well, the Confederacy kind of killed 360,000 people, blah, blah, blah. So we don't even have the basic, historical same plane to start from, which is tough.
So I kind of have a question / just food for thought, because I know we can't answer, but how do we break down the stereotype of this community around, I don't know how long it's been since we were voted on it, but this friendliest small town in America? I hear people recite that as, we don't have a problem here because we're the friendliest small town in America.
So it's systemic. All of this is systemic. So friendliest small town in America awarded, I think it was like 1997, they had a couple of years running. Or it might have been after that. Either way, I thought that was interesting as well. And so it was Best of the Road Show, right? Best of the Road Show is a subsidiary of Rand McNally. You go on their list of people that go through and award these cities, and you look at the list, and the list is pretty homogenous. White women aged 22 to 30. People more prone to probably drive past, a statue and not think about it. And so with all these evaluation systems, you look at those and you ask Rand McNally. This is why when people say diversity and inclusion is important, this is why. Because you expose yourself to risk by closing off, outside thought. If you don't include somebody like Asia in that group, then you're probably going to do something that's going to look pretty stupid later on. And so that's one of the exercises that I did to see, like, wow. And immediately they disassociate. They say, well, we didn't award it since, X amount of years. And then you can get into, well, they're using your trademark, on their official government documents. And you would hope that they would take action and recognize what they've done, and that's what hasn't happened yet from an accountability standpoint. So that's just one way, but like I said, you can go insane just looking at every root of these things.
I just feel like there's a lot of people that I know and that I talk to that have the ability, I see it, they have the ability to get there and to be more inclusive, but there is that barrier of they don't see it, and why don't they see it, and how do you help them, how do I help my fellow white people come around and see what they're blindly looking past what is blatantly there. And a lot of them just use those excuses of, well, it's Murray, we're friendly. And on a personal level, with being a queer person in Murray, Kentucky, I've faced adversity. I've had people stop on the street and yell at things from their car at me. I've had death threats. I've had stalkers. I've had a lot of things happen. And what I kind of step back and personally do is just try to change one person at a time based on who I meet. And I've been successful in that, but it's so slow and it's so difficult to do. And then I also see that there's all these allies, for me, who privately say, I support you, I'm there for you, I'm there for the cause, but they don't step up and do something and say something when they should. And the same goes for racism. And I don't do enough to help fight racism. I know that, and I'm actively working on trying to catch myself when can I say more, when can I do more, and just how do I, help other people in my shoes also do that, because I think people in my shoes that are allies are the ones that are going to help change, things on voting in the right people. We are, we've got to be the ones to step up and say, hey, to our buddies, you can't just throw your vote away or not vote or, not speak up in the circles that you need to speak up in.
I think that some people do not know. Like, they literally don't know, because some of the things that they might look up it's already created an algorithm, so it's not going to pop up anything else. I was watching this thing on Netflix. It was about Facebook and social media, how people might just be on the wrong side of things. Like, they literally just don't get any real news. Like, that's because they started off with fake news. So it's just going to continue to pop up the same thing, so they literally just don't know unless they're at the protest and they see it themselves or something like that. And especially because the news, like our own news, they just don't post, like they don't say it the right way. They don't say it as honestly as it actually happened and stuff like that. So they're just reading what they're given. And that's not their fault either. And if they don't ever see it, then how are they supposed to know? There's like two ways to think about it, unless somebody actually tells them or they see it themselves. And a lot of times they don't even try to find a live stream. They just kind of go with whatever's posted and whatever's edited, because that's just what they're used to. And I wish that there was a way to get around that. But if their Facebook's always going to pop up the same algorithm that it's used to, they're not going to see anything else.
That's part of the problem with how we came to the resolution to keep the monument in place, because there's two things that were cited by the government officials. And I always speak about the government in its capacity rather than the individuals. And so there's two ways to look at it. The government made a decision, right? Well, I see that's where you get to, all right, now you have a strategy to attack that however you want to do that. But the individuals are there not to consume knowledge and act knowing that people don't have access to the right knowledge. When you get put in a certain position, you have to be a leader. In a democratic republic, as we are, that's why you're there. And so one of the things that was cited in the resolution to keep the monument was it stays there. One is as long as the UDC wills it. And then two, as long as the will of the people want it there. And there's never been a decision in the United States where we came out better by listening to the loud majority. The reason we're a democratic republic is because the access to information right here, the people in this room, and really the people in Murray, because of the status of the town, having a university, we have access to more knowledge and we know better, so we should do better. Just like these elected officials. to refer to, well, you know, these 300 people that I saw in the street said it should stay is deferring, you know, your responsibility as a leader. If I went to camp and I said, like, hey, you know, all the guys said that they want to run go routes every single play because it's cool. And I did that, and we went on to continue getting beaten, embarrassed, then I should be fired immediately. Or I don't make a whole lot of money, but I should have my salary reduced, because then anybody can do that. We can just put a poll up on Facebook. But our obligation is or their obligation as leaders is to make decisions on what's right. Now, if you look at, you know, Murray itself, it's interesting. We had to talk as a team about this. There's a marker on the university about desegregation, and I think it's 1955. And Murray is the last place to desegregate as a university in the state of Kentucky, which is triggered me because I knew Brown v. Board of Education was 1954. So we can continue to defer and wait till the will of something happens, and we'll continue to be behind and last. The leadership should have the vision to look at what's going on, you know, nationally, and recognize that, you know, how do you, I'm always going to be in the minority here. You're always going to be in the minority here. But once you allow, you know, evil to take place against one person, it's going to affect you. On this past Saturday, you know, those guns weren't just that gun was not just pointed at a black guy. That gun was pointed at someone who looks like you. Just like the woman in Charlottesville, Heather Heyer, she didn't look like me. She looked like you. She was killed. So eventually this kills you, and that's what you have to get them to understand. It's like, this kills you, either through a bullet or economically. If we look at all these sundown towns like Benton, how many people, including myself, was like, nah, I'm good. I'm not moving over there. What does that do to your town? I went like a month ago, I went to Cairo, Illinois, because I'd wanted to see physically, you know, where some of these movements took place and what happens. And I went and sat at the site of where the largest lynching, or 10,000 people came to watch a lynching, dismember a man, and then it led to racial strife for decades. And now the town looks like a mix of Hurricane Katrina and Baghdad, you know, at the height of operations in Iraq. And it's foreseeable, and that's what happens. And that's every time you make a choice not to progress as a leader because of what the mob wants, then you're just one step closer to becoming one of these towns that gets passed by. And that's what affects us all. And that's what I would expect to be the connection there, regardless of media.